about the scientific method. So I just want you to take a moment and review those steps of the scientific method. And the way that we're going to proceed today is by doing a couple of things. We're going to look at the scientific method in terms of review, but we're also interested in looking at the scientific method and its application to asexual reproduction in terms of spontaneous generation. So we're going to look at a video clip that is going to explain to you an experiment that Francisco Redi did to understand that spontaneous generation is in fact something that does not happen. Okay, so go ahead and take a moment to review the steps. No writing, no writing. We'll have plenty of time for writing in the very, very near future. Okay, so go ahead and tell me the first step of the scientific method. Sarah, go ahead.
Ask a question.
Okay, so asking a question. The questions are based on observations, things that I see, things that I hear, things that I touch, taste, and smell. And so when I look at the next step of the scientific method, what do I do then? What's the next step after I ask my question, Brianna?
Form a hypothesis.
I want to form a hypothesis. And so, when I form a hypothesis, I'm actually stating an expected outcome. Okay? I'm going to form a hypothesis in such a way that it's testable, and I am stating my expectation of how the question is going to be answered. Now I want you to think about this in terms of what you've done in other classes, where you've made a claim, and you had to support your claim with what? What do we support the claim with? Go ahead, KJ. Evidence. Yeah, how many pieces? Two pieces of evidence. Where does the evidence come from? It comes from our next step. The next step, Jacob, is? Testing the hypothesis. When I test my hypothesis, I'm going to conduct an experiment. The experiment is going to either support or refute my claim. My hypothesis will either be supported or refuted. Once I analyze my results, I then have to draw conclusions and I communicate it. And when I'm communicating that piece, it's done through the written word. Okay? So just a little bit of review about the connection between things that you've done here with the scientific method and the writing pieces that we do in the other classrooms. Today we're going to take a look at a video, and you're going to watch the video 3 times. If you have a pink sheet of paper, when you watch the video, you are going to record all of the information that has to do with the parts of the scientific method. If you have the green sheet of paper, you are going to record all of the observations that Redi makes during his experiment. And then the people with blue sheets of paper, you're going to record the conclusions that Redi makes as a result of his experiment. Okay, so I'm going to start the video for the first time. When you watch the video the first time, you're probably only going to pick up maybe 1 or 2 pieces of information, and that's okay. You'll have 2 other opportunities to watch the video.
Spontaneous generation proposed that life or living organisms could be spontaneously generated from non-living matter. Similar to Louis Pasteur's spontaneous generation theory, the 17th century Italian scientist Francesco Redi conducted an experiment to refute the theory of spontaneous generation nearly 200 years earlier. Francesco Redi showed that magnets do not spontaneously arise from decaying matter. prove this, he designed a simple controlled experiment, now referred to as the ready experiment. The idea of a controlled experiment is that two tests are identical in every aspect except for one factor. When carried out simultaneously, the hypothesis is that this different factor, called the manipulated variable, is the cause of the different results in each experiment. Reddy placed meat in two identical jars. He left one jar uncovered and allowed flies to come into contact with the meat. He covered the other jar with a cheesecloth or other cloth that allowed air to pass through it. Contact with the air allowed the meat to decay, just as the other would. Both pieces of meat would decay, but only the one that had physical contact with the flies would produce maggots. Therefore, decay itself would be eliminated as the cause. After a short period of time, Reddy observed maggots on the decaying meat of the open jar. There were no maggots on the meat in the covered jar. Reddy therefore concluded that the flies laid eggs on the meat in the open jar, which caused the maggots. Because the flies could not lay eggs on the meat in the covered jar, no maggots were produced. Reddy therefore proved that decaying meat did not produce maggots.
Okay, so you should have at least one piece of evidence at this point. Possibly two. And we're going to watch the video 2 more times, all right? So the first time through, you probably didn't pick up too many pieces of information about your topic. So go ahead and finish your thoughts, and then we're going to watch this 2 more times. Now, the second time through, you should pick up probably 2 more pieces of information that you didn't already know. Okay, so things that you didn't know already are what you're going to record in your bullets. Okay, here we go.
The theory of spontaneous generation proposed that life, or living organisms, could be spontaneously generated from non-living matter. Similar to Louis Pasteur's spontaneous generation experiment, the 17th century Italian scientist Francesco Reddy conducted an experiment to refute the theory of spontaneous generation nearly 200 years earlier. Francesco Reddy showed that maggots do not spontaneously arise from decaying meat. To prove this, he designed a simple controlled experiment, now referred to as the Reddy experiment. The idea of a controlled experiment is that 2 tests are identical in every aspect except for one factor. When carried out simultaneously, the hypothesis is that this different factor, called the manipulated variable, is the cause of the different results in each experiment. Reddy placed meat in 2 identical jars. He left one jar uncovered and allowed flies to come into contact with the meat. He covered the other jar with a cheesecloth or other cloth that allowed air to pass through. Contact with the air allowed the meat to decay, just as the other would. Both pieces of meat would decay, but only the one that had physical contact with the flies would produce maggots. Therefore, the decay itself would be eliminated as the cause. After a short period of time, Reddy observed maggots on the decaying meat of the open jar. There were no maggots on the meat in the covered jar. He therefore concluded that the flies laid eggs on the meat in the open jar, which caused the maggots. Because the flies could not lay eggs on the meat in the covered jar, no maggots were produced. Reddy therefore proved that decaying meat did not produce maggots.
Okay, so at this time we should probably have 3, possibly 4 pieces of information recorded about our topic. after your bullets. So take a moment to finish recording your thoughts, and then we'll watch it one last time so that you can finalize your thoughts and add another piece of information that you didn't already know before you watch the video. Okay, here's the last time.
The theory of spontaneous generation proposed that life, or living organisms, could be spontaneously generated from non-living matter. Similar to Louis Pasteur's spontaneous generation experiment, the 17th century Italian scientist Francesco Redi conducted an experiment to refute the theory of spontaneous generation nearly 200 years earlier. Francesco Redi showed that maggots do not spontaneously arise from decaying meat. To prove this, he designed a simple controlled experiment, now referred to as the Redi experiment. The idea of a controlled experiment is that two tests are identical in every aspect except for one factor. When carried out simultaneously, the hypothesis is that this different factor, called the manipulated variable, is the cause of the different results in each experiment. Redi placed meat in two identical jars. He left one jar uncovered and allowed flies to come into contact with the meat. He covered the other jar with a cheesecloth or other cloth that allowed air to pass through. Contact with the air allowed the meat to decay, just as the other would. Both pieces of meat would decay, but only the one that had physical contact with the flies would produce maggots. Therefore, the decay itself would be eliminated as the cause. After a short period of time, Redi observed maggots on the open jar. There were no maggots on the meat covered. Redi therefore concluded that the flies laid eggs on the meat in the open jar, which caused the maggots. Because the flies could not lay eggs on the meat in the covered jar, no maggots were produced. Redi therefore proved that decaying meat did not produce maggots.
All right, go ahead and finish your thoughts on the piece of content that you were focusing on. When you're finished with your thoughts, you're going to have an opportunity to share your writing with somebody else who completed the same piece. And then when we're finished with that, we're going to group ourselves so that we have each of the three different lenses that we were looking at the video with in one group. And then you'll each share what you recorded about the video. And then the last step is going to be to answer a writing prompt in your thought balloon. Okay, so there shouldn't be any writing in the thought balloon until the very, very last step. All right, so Devin, I want you to go up and just take a seat next to Justin. And Kara, you can go have a seat next to Brianna. So at this point, if everybody has finished writing, we're interested in sharing with the person that we're sitting next to, because you should have the same color. Okay, so go ahead and exchange your thoughts about what you observed during the video clip.
I have not and I got supplies, they came with eggs, decaying meat, they didn't have supplies, and then I have this, I can't figure out this, but
You left one jar open and the flies came in contact with that. You left jar closed.
It's definitely spontaneous generation.
They both decayed because they had contact with air, and flies couldn't lay on the eggs underneath them for minutes jar.
And that spontaneous generation is not possible. Had he then figured out on how the maggots came from meat, and then he's after like
Okay, you have one more minute.
What did you say about the Gauss jar?
Gauss jars left flies to lay eggs on top of the jar. And steel jars left flies to lay no eggs at all.
I also said it kind of goes with the whole thing, but maggots were only on the piece of meat that wasn't in the uncovered jar.
Do we have any more, or do we share them all?
Yeah.
Okay.
We have one more.
Oh, you do? Okay.
The king meat did not generate maggots. Did not generate maggots.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I was trying to look through the video for anything I'll say it right. But, yeah. She said it was pretty good, so. Let's see. Yeah.
Okay, so let's return to our assigned seats if we move. Okay, well, actually, Devin, I need you to stay here. You're going to stay here. Okay, so the first 3 rows, if everybody just turns toward the center table, you'll have each piece of information. So everybody here is green. So people that are blue need to turn around to the people that are green, and people that are pink need to turn around to people that are green. Okay, so Mason, you're going to have to slide up here. Jersey, you're going to have to slide over here. Jack, you're coming up here, and Jack and Sarah, the two of you are going to work together, and we'll find a piece of
Okay. So we have yours for this.
Okay, so go ahead and share out your information.
Fries. Where's that one? No. Okay. If you leave I think it's just okay, he left one chart and he put his slides came into contact with left Wouldn't that be like observations or something? Okay. Okay, Mason. No, your turn. He left one jar closed and then that can be the key with contact before.
When he observed that maggots weren't on the meats in the covered jar, he observed that maggots were only on the open, only in the open jar. He observed that maggots didn't decay in meat, and he observed that flies laid eggs, and the eggs turned into maggots. The king
Flies laid eggs only on the meat.
flies laid eggs.
Flies couldn't lay out on the meat in the covered jar.
I started writing that, and I didn't know what to write, so I just erased this. So I wrote like 3 parts. I wrote like 1 part.
It seems like me and Mason like
What do we do?
like Gary's like similar but like not so
Like, always when I thought about
Yes.
what do we put in the Okay. We go back to our seats.
Yeah, if you're all set with your sharing, we'll be at listen to a member of your group talk about the different parts of the scientific method that were presented in the video clip. You should have had an opportunity to listen to the observations that were made about the READY experiment. And then finally, somebody should have shared with you the conclusions about the experiment that was conducted. Now, on the bottom of your page, you have a huge thought balloon. And the way that we are going to approach the thought balloon is with the two thoughts in mind that are posted on the board. And so the first thing that we want to consider is how was the scientific method used? And then we want to think about what observations and conclusions did READY make. Now, the writing prompt that you are going to answer is, do living things spontaneously generate from non-living matter? Okay, so this is our writing prompt here that we're interested in responding to in the thought balloon. Okay, so inside the thought balloon with the information that you have, go ahead and answer the writing prompt. Remember, it's a claim supported by how many pieces of evidence, everybody? 2. Right, for about 1 more minute. right, Brianna, when you're all ready, go ahead and read what you wrote.
Living things do not spontaneously generate from non-living matter. One piece of evidence is that maggots are produced from flies and not decaying meat. Another piece of evidence is that when the meat had no physical contact with the flies, no maggots were found on the decaying meat.
Oh, I love it. Okay, I like the way you made the connection between there not being a cover on one of the jars, and that was the one that actually produced the maggots. Okay, Jillian, are you all set over there?
Almost done.
Okay, we'll come back to you. Mason, are you ready? Go ahead and finish your thoughts. Jim, go ahead.
Okay. So living things do not spontaneously generate from non-living matter. In Ray's experiment, he concluded that the decaying meat could not produce maggots. The flies only laid eggs on the meat in the uncovered jar, which proves that the meat in the covered jars cannot produce eggs.
Nicely done. Who else is ready? Go ahead, Sam.
Non-living things do not spontaneously generate from non-living matter. Ray concluded that meat that came into contact with flies had maggots. The covered jars had no maggots because the flies couldn't lay eggs in the meat. Gauze covered jars that left flies to lay eggs on top of the jar.
Great, thank you very much. Go ahead, Bailey.
No living things do not spontaneously generate from non-living matter. In the experiments, only the meat that came in contact with the meat produced maggots. Or only the flies that came in contact with the meat produced maggots. Also in the experiments, the meat that was still closed from the flies still rotted and no maggots were produced.
Great. Ready, Julie?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Living things do not spontaneously generate from non-living matter. In Reddy's experiment, he asked himself if maggots form from decaying meat. He formed an experiment to see if they would form. He put meat in 2 jars, one that was covered and one that was not covered. He observed that flies were attracted by the smell of the decaying meat. In the open jar, maggots formed on the meat, and on the closed jar, maggots did not form. Reddy also concluded that maggots form only by the physical contact with flies.
Nicely done. I like the way you added the information on the observation about the odor that the meat was producing. He used that as one of his reasons why the flies were attracted. Nicely done. Okay, Devin, you want to go ahead?
Living things do not spontaneously generate from living matter. For example, the flies in Reddy's experiment, they did not come from decayed meat, but they were eggs that flies laid. He found that by having a covered and uncovered jar. The uncovered jar had maggots because the flies could go in and lay eggs on top of the meat.
Great. Thank you very much. Anybody else want to volunteer before we say goodbye to Mrs. Bashaw? Go ahead, Marciana.
Living things do not spontaneously generate from non-living matter. In the experiment, Reddy showed that only open jars of decaying meat had maggots on them. The jar that was covered and contained decaying meat did not have any maggots because the flies did not lay eggs on it.